partnerships manager at CREA, where we do AI-powered development for venture-backed startups. And we also have a fund focusing on early-stage enterprise companies, taking them to B2B, to Fortune 500 partnerships, and then to IPO exit. I'd like to welcome our panelists for today. We have Kayvan Baroumand, from Executive Chairman of Peach Score, joining us, and Daniel Itzkowski from Level Up Ventures. All right, so it looks like we have full house. Everyone's here, and I'll do a quick intro of all of us, and we can go ahead and get started on how we can accelerate our startup journey. Kayvan, do you want to go ahead and get us started on? Okay, I'll start. I can. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned, I lead senior partnerships at CREA, focusing on AI-powered development for venture-backed startups. And we also have the fund focusing on early-stage investments. And I got my experience working in the VC space thanks to Kayvan, the starter of Plug and Play, where I helped launch the Plug and Play LA program in the media space, working with Meta to help them find startups to source and invest, and then get them to get them to partnerships. And now we'll go ahead and do our next round of intros.
So I'm supposed to introduce myself, I guess, right? So I'm Daniel Itzkowski. I'm a partner at Level Up Ventures, but I also work with a number of accelerators, including 500 Global, the Alchemist Accelerator, and Founder Institute, all great accelerators with their own kind of unique focus. But I'm also a 5-time entrepreneur. Most people know me for being the inventor of the exploding bike lock, skunk lock. So that's kind of my first success. And since then, I've been mostly focused on helping mission-driven founders raise capital and helping them succeed over long term through mentorship and working with accelerators.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Kayvan Baroumand. I am the executive chair of Peach Score and the founder of SigmaRank. Peach Score is an AI-driven accelerator program where we built an engine. Where we built an engine to help startups kind of provide a FICO score for them to understand where, provide some benchmarking data to help them understand how they benchmark against other startups and areas where they're vulnerable and the strengths and so forth. And then there's also an accelerator program along with access to capital, mentors, corporations, and so forth. And then I'm also the founder of a fund called SigmaRank, which is also an AI-driven fund. And what we do is we score every single round of investment at every stage globally. And what we do is we go in at Series B in the top 10% of rounds happening globally. So we just started making investments last year. We made about 11 investments. This year we'll make about 25.
So it's great to hear we have both coming from not only the investment world, but also the accelerator world in the early stage and the later stage. So we keep hearing the word accelerator, and I'm not talking about putting gas to the pedal in your car. Let's talk about accelerator for the startup world. Can both of you share how do you go about working with your accelerators? What specific criteria do you see for inviting startups to participate, and what success looks like for them?
Want to go? Okay, so as Arezu mentioned, I was a founding CEO of Plug and Play, and so we were one of the first companies to start these accelerator programs back when 500 startups started in YC, and now I kind of call us, I don't call us the accelerator, I call us the anti-accelerator. And what do I mean by that? Accelerators are basically an investment vehicle, okay? They're an investment vehicle with structured education, and you apply to the program, and there's certain cohorts, and you basically, you go in, you give up, you get anywhere from about 25,000 to 150,000, and you're giving up anywhere from 7 to 12% equity. We kind of, as we looked at the data, we kind of realized that this is some kind of scary data points. There's about 1.5 million startups around the world globally, that are looking for investments. There's around 8,000 accelerators around the world, and only 17,500 startups get accepted to these accelerator programs. So there's a huge underserved market. So we said, what's wrong with that 18,001 startup? It's not that they're not good. It's just that they didn't fall part of that part of that criteria for that fund or for that accelerator program. So we said, let's go serve the unserved. That's why I call this the the unaccelerator program. And so what we say is, there's great things about accelerator programs, right? I mean, that structured education, access to capital, the mentors, that's all great, right? And we said, how can we scale this to serve that other 1.45 million, in the world? And so that's where Pete's Score came about. And so what we do is we provide a scoring engine for that founder so that they know how they fare compared to other startups, but also where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and things to watch out for. So we're using AI to help the founders. And so that's basically how we go about it. Accelerator programs are great programs. If you get in one, please get into it. But I also think that you could use multiple accelerators at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great foundational point there. It is harder to get into an accelerator, let's say a top tier accelerator, than getting into Harvard and Stanford for perspective, percentage wise. So it's very, very competitive. So I do encourage founders to be practical, apply first before deciding which one do I go to, because the probability is you're not going to get in, unfortunately. That's just the reality of it. There is a plethora of different types of accelerators. There's so many of them. You have to really research which one is right for you. Don't necessarily just go for the brand name. If you're a B2B, Alchemist may be a better option than YC, for example. So definitely be purposeful in terms of which accelerators you think are a good fit for your company. But what was the last part of the question? There was one ending.
How can accelerators ensure the success of startups?
So in short, I don't know accelerators can ensure the success of a startup, and there's an inverse relationship between how experienced a founder is and how much they need an accelerator. So if a founder is very, very experienced, they may be less inclined to apply to an accelerator, but at the same time, that founder has the highest probability of success. So accelerators aren't there necessarily to ensure the success of a founder. They're there to accelerate a founder's abilities, is one way of looking at it. And I think one interesting trend right now is a lot of VC funds are also implementing kind of accelerator components that are VC funds, and it's called kind of a value add VC. So in general, I think one area that is extremely underserved is that accelerators or VCs don't give enough support to enough founders. They kind of just give money, most of the traditional ones, where accelerators give support first and mentorship, and money kind of comes along with that. But it's a second priority.
I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of folks, when they think about VC, they think about funding, and accelerator is the same thing. Both you shared about how mentorship comes out of accelerators. Can you share some more specifics of the benefits of joining the your respective accelerators you've worked with?
Well, let me kind of start with, as you're all founders, right? And I've founded many companies, and some have been very successful and some not. And I don't talk about those who have not, but I've learned a lot from those who have not. One thing that I kind of want to caution everybody when it comes to accelerator programs, and I've shared this with a few of you that I had a conversation with earlier today. Everyone makes a huge deal about the demo day, right, of a graduating from this accelerator program. And even though that is a milestone, it's kind of like graduating from kindergarten, right? It's worth a cupcake, okay? Definitely worth a cupcake. And what it does do, though, it tells the market that you have the basic foundation to build a scalable venture. But I think what happens is there's so much hype around these these demo days that sometimes the founders forget that, just because you say you went to YC, they go, oh, I graduated from YC, and so forth. And I go, great, you're a great kindergartner, and a startup, even a YC graduate, is for minimum 2 to 3 years. And so understand that journey you're going through. And so when it comes to mentors, right? And that's why, even though we have an accelerator program, we don't call ourselves, I guess today we're calling it an accelerator, but we actually call it a startup platform. Because once let's say you graduate from the accelerator program, now the work just begins, right? You need to raise multiple rounds of funding. You need to have basically test your thesis. You're probably, if you're a very early stage company, I promise you're pivoted at least once or twice by the time you graduate from the program. Because of why? Because you're learning, right? And so the mentors that these accelerated programs have are just helping you accelerate either that pivot or that validation. And so the top tier ones are the ones that you've mentioned, the ones we're involved in, we have a very large network. And so, the success is really determined by your willingness and ability to leverage those resources. Now, I could just tell you a pet peeve that I have, okay? And I don't know if you have the same, you tell me, Daniel. We don't owe you anything, okay? Just because you're part of an accelerator program. And the reason I say that is when you are part of a program, make sure you give as much as you take, okay? And if anything, try to give more than you take, because I promise you in the long run, that will help you out. And so when you graduate from our accelerator program, we encourage you to support the new cohorts, right? And that's how you build that network.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, accelerators, if you are an experienced founder and for a most part you know what you're doing, they will, through capital and networks and mentorship, help you accelerate your path to success. However, for most founders, the biggest benefit of an accelerator, if you're fortunate enough to get in, is it will accelerate your education process. I think my biggest pet peeve, that is one of them, what you mentioned, but my biggest pet peeve is new founders tend to approach entrepreneurship as if it's something that you can just quit your job, come out of school, and expect to be a great founder within a year or two. You would never expect a doctor or a surgeon or a lawyer to do an operation on you and not kill you with less than 10 years of experience. And I can say this for a fact, it takes no less than 10 years to get that level of experience where you're in a place where you're not effectively just burning investor money. So if you're going to burn someone's money, please burn accelerators, not your loved ones, not your family, not your friends, because that is the equivalent of you walking into an operating room and saying, yeah, I can do open heart surgery. It is equivalent to that. There is a significant learning process and journey. And an accelerator, if you put in a lot, most will give you equal or more value back. Yeah. But that is the essence of this entire process. Approach it like a relationship building and mentorship activity. The money, I would say, is the least valuable part of that. That's just so you can quit your job for 6 months. Yeah. And really give it your all.
On that note, it's really, really important. It's really important if you decide to start a startup, have a little bit of savings. Don't go in desperate. And one too many founders I've known, they're like, they quit their job and they're okay, I'll do a startup. And it takes time, okay? And and that's why statistically, over 90% of startups fail. Okay, and so understand that just because you go through an accelerated program, yes, that basically quadruples your chance of success, but you're still at risk. So have a little bit of savings, to basically, for the worst case scenario. And during these times when there's headwinds around fundraising, it's even more important. The nice thing, there's programs like, a lot of these, like Founders Institute, right? Or Peach Score. you could actually, if you wanted to, still keep your job, do the program, right? And then when you get your funding and you've learned more, then quit your job. And because the worst thing you can do as a founder is be desperate raising money. And that shows. I mean, it shows in your face, it shows in how you communicate, and everything else. So, and by the way, just like a bank, almost like, those companies, that know they're going to get the money, they don't need the money. That's who the investors want, right? And need the money. For some reason, investors are like, no, he's too desperate, and it's not going to be, the money's not going to go to good use. So anyway, that's just a little bit of advice I would give today. And now the venture ecosystem is coming back. At Signal Rank, we check everything. We know what's going on a daily basis. So venture is coming back, but it's coming back slowly. And there's an expectation. You have more of an expectation at an early stage than you did, let's say, 8 or 10 years ago, right? And investors want more for their money. You have to have a solid team. You have to have a product, at least in some stages, and so all these things. Now the good news is there's more money, right? And there's more funds and there's more resources, but that also means that the expectations have gone up also.
I think that's a really important point, actually, because when I started my first company 15 years ago, let's say, you can go and pitch investors with hotspot prototype at that point. If you just had a prototype and you showed that you spoke with enough customers and that you showed that there is potential value, you can get some money. In some ways, this is the easiest time to start a startup. In some ways, it's the hardest. I've also been to OpenAI hackathons where a team of 3 Stanford computer science PhDs with AI are able to build full-fledged products that would take a year to build. They built it in a weekend. That's the order of magnitude difference that you're competing with. So to add to that, it's also incredibly difficult because the expectations are very high for accelerators now because it's so much easier to build things if you're technical. So if you're a non-technical founder, I also encourage most of you to find a co-founder who is technical.
And I also wanted to chime in on what Kayvan was saying, that there is a lot of capital right now globally. So for example, a lot of folks are actually exploring the UAE GCC region. All of them have capital, but they've also come and said, we know we have the money, but once again, we need to see metrics in terms of how many customers do you have? Do you have the product built out? How are you going to leverage our local economy, local talent to boost our economy? So it's become a very quantitative metrics game on what you're building. And accelerators want to see those numbers nowadays. And also to chime in about the cupcake, how do we go beyond just getting that cupcake after demo day? And let's actually step into our 2 favorite letters, AI. How has that changed the game?
Well, I live AI right now, right? So AI, well, this is the nice thing about AI, right? The industry has matured to a sense where there's enough data to basically support and make decisions on. And that's why, we're one of the first, and we're not the only AI-driven fund, but, we make 100% of our decisions. We let our AI tell us which companies to invest in. Now, if you have the right model, the logistic model, heuristic model, and, because there's enough data points, and I'll give you an example, for us, Signal Rank, last year, which was probably the worst year in about 10 years in venture, there were still around 29,000 rounds of investment that are happening. Okay, in 2021, there were about close to 40. Okay, and so when you have that kind of data, right? When you're looking at it, from 15,000 foot level, there's a lot of information there, a lot of nuggets in there. And so that's why, we use AI to identify the best companies to invest in, right? We basically score every fund. By the way, every fund has a track record, right? So it's easy to score them. And every company that gets funding, we know at what stage who all the investors are. So it's actually pretty logical. So when you have a large industry, AI, all it does is just basically helps you make decisions faster. And the same with Peace Score, right? When there's, we built our platform on data from 560,000 startups, right? So that's a pretty large data set. And our scoring engine, when and if you know the industry, right? If you know there's like 7 broad categories and 50 subcategories and 900 data points, well, then it's really easy to use AI to help the founders basically, understand how they're doing and what improvements you can make based on benchmarking data and insights from the industry and so forth. So, we couldn't build Peach Score 7 years ago. Right? It just couldn't be, or let's say before cloud computing at least, right? So right now, AI is just helping you make better decisions. If you understand the industry and you understand what are the key data points that you need to look at to make decisions, and it automates that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all those points. I think in addition to that, what I'm really excited about is I think as an investor, we're going to see a lot more companies have to raise a lot less capital to get through, seed, Series A, Series B. Just the fidelity of tools has gotten so good that you can build deep tech in half the time with half the money, maybe less than that. And ultimately, the reason I love accelerators is because the biggest gap in the market is not founders. It's experienced, educated founders. And as a VC, as an investor, as someone that's involved in the accelerator world, I love to see more people become great founders. And I think accelerators are only one piece of that journey. Another piece of that journey is a very personal journey. Most founders that I run into that pitch me as an angel investor are actually coming from big tech companies where they've made a substantial amount of money. Most are not the ones that quit with nothing. They have 1 month of savings, nothing saved up. I think AI is going to allow more people that are in less fortunate positions to be able to say, okay, I can afford to, for the next 3 months, just work on this idea, see if it has legs, and build something that's good enough to get customers and feedback within this time period, which before it would take 2 years to get something meaningful to market, unless you had just a superstar technical team or a lot of money where you can hire people, right? But that's what I'm most excited about is I think we're going to see a lot of founders that may have been not as technical all of a sudden have a lot more opportunities to build technology and prove their thesis and prove that these products actually have legs.
I want to make a caveat. I agree with you that you could build more with less. But one thing you need to kind of, in today's market, okay, in today's venture market, because there's still some headwinds against you, right, in venture, you want to raise enough money to give you a little longer runway, okay? So yes, it takes less to build more, but you need a little bit, you just want to stretch out your dollar, and so like what we recommend, if you're at the seed stage, raise enough money to at least have 1.5 years worth of capital, to support your burn. And so you may give up a little bit right now, but it's kind of like, it's like an insurance policy, right? The worst thing you want to do is raise money when you need money. Okay, and it's just like, it's like going to a bank, right? You're trying to get a loan from a bank, the criteria for getting a loan from a bank is like it's really for people who don't need the money, right? And the same to a certain extent applies to venture. So I would just say that, and what's going to happen is because of the market conditions, right? And because of the competitive nature of things, yes, you can build technology faster, but guess what? There's more competition, right? And so you got to learn how to differentiate yourself. You got to be able to compete. And if you're in the enterprise space, getting an enterprise customer today, oh my God, it's crazy, and you have all these tools. And I actually was joking the other day. I was telling, one of my investor partners, I said, these tools are to help you with the enterprise deals. There is one that's causing the delays in getting an enterprise customer. Because all this technology, you look at all the things that you need to do, when if you just had a relationship with that decision maker, it could accelerate things a lot faster. And that's another benefit of accelerator programs, is having those corporate relationships, right? Because corporations are getting more and more engaged in the startup world. In the past, they wouldn't, right? And because that's too much risk. But what corporations have realized is, guess what? That next, bombing lock, is going to disrupt, master lock, right? And so I might as well, at least engage with them and learn. And by the way, corporate innovation is really expensive, right? If you look at, companies like HP, and this is a worst case scenario, but just let's use HP as an example. 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, HP's R&D budget was $7.5 billion a year, right? And HP is probably the least innovative company in the world, even though it started out, in the garage, right? The HP garage. Now their budget for around innovation is less than $1 billion. But what are they doing? They're basically acquiring companies, right? It's a lot cheaper to acquire a company than it is to build, and they're realizing that. And so the best path into a corporation, my recommendation is, if any of those who need to have those strategic partners, is go through their innovation arm, because you bypass all the procurement, you bypass all the things that you need to do, and you kind of get yourself in there, and then you'll figure your way out from there, because those people know how to navigate through all the bureaucracy and the business units, and who are the decision makers, and where's all the politics, and so forth. So, my advice to you guys, if you need to have a strategic partner, go to the innovation arm. And more corporations today have these innovation arms.
And with regards to the innovation arm, the folks in those teams, they're also fighting for their jobs, because it's a nice to have for these companies. So if you're able to tap into there, show them that they're going to be able to make money or help the company save money, it saves their job and also the company overall.
Yeah.
And you get an enterprise customer that pays. So on top of that, with the accelerators, we've learned why the benefits are in terms of not only funding, but the mentorship. Let's also learn about some hard examples and success stories. If you guys can share some that you've worked with from your accelerator experience with the startups that have gone on beyond the cupcake.
So besides the cupcake, go ahead, Daniel. I've been talking. So I would say the number one cause of failure in a startup, what do you guys think it is? Yeah, the team. Okay. The team is probably the biggest cause of a startup's failure. It's not capital. Because guess what? If you have a good team, you'll figure out how to work it without the capital, right? If you believe in your product, you will do whatever you need to do to make, get from point A to point B. But if you have a teammate or a co-founder, and by the way, I'm saying this from experience, unfortunately, it's easier to get a divorce than it is to get rid of a co-founder. Right. And so make sure, and if you look at those successful startups, that become unicorns, they had an amazing team, and they more than 70% of the time they've worked together previously. They know each other's strengths and they know each other's weaknesses. So number one cause of failure, the team, hands down. Right. But I say that's just one example, but go ahead, you can talk.
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback on that, because I think that's a good point. The team is the number one cause of failure. Below that, I would say, or within that same flavor, I would say the number one cause of failure is the founders give up. And that's why my point of qualification generally is I try to evaluate these intangibles of who someone is as a human being before looking at all the data as well. Because I've seen more founders fail because they gave up, let's say, 6 months, maybe a year too early on an idea than pretty much anything else, not running out of money, or because you can build if you have a great team, you can build your way out of most problems, or you can sell your way out of most problems. But I just wanted to add to that really quick.
There's one other thing I think is also really important. And that is the second cause of failure, and I think you agree with me, is not finding product market fit, right? So, and that, what does that mean? And if you're a technical founder, you, and I've seen this so many times, you tend to overbuild, right? Because you're technical and you think, okay, my technology is installed. So you start building more and more features. And what you have not done is engage your customers enough. If there's anything I recommend you guys to learn and read and become expert in, is the whole lean startup methodology. And because that is, and understand, that whole process of customer discovery, starting with your thesis, and it's hard because you have to go what the lean startup methodology tells you to do, and the whole, there's a book called 4 Steps of Epiphany. I don't know if you guys, by Steve Blank. Definitely buy that book. Okay, and Steve Blank's not paying me, but I definitely recommend it. And because this is what happens, right? When you have an idea, right, you start with an hypothesis, right? And, even myself, I know this space, and I'm not trying to be arrogant. I've been in this space for 20 years, right? And, I started with Plug and Play. I had GSV Labs, and, now I'm, helping Peace Score. And I'm telling you, I've been doing the same thing for 20 years. And the model and the requirements of the customers has changed in every single one of these entities. Okay. And so what you need to do, which is the toughest thing to do, right, is get in front of those customers and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Right. So before you even write a line of code, it's really hard to go talk to these potential customers. And so this is what accelerator programs will help you do, right? You kind of need to understand, we got to get to the core of your essence, right? What is it that you're doing, right? Because, because this is what's going to happen. If you're vague in what kind of problem you're solving, guess what? Your solutions are going to be vague too. I promise you 100%. And that's where you start building too much, because you're just trying to go, oh my God, I don't know what my customers want. So getting to that essence of what that MVP is, and getting to that core problem that you're solving will help you get to that product market fit. And so that's just really, really important. Anyway, that's one thing.
Yeah, just to add to that. So product market fit, obviously incredibly important. Some great books to read. I'd add 0 to 1 to that as well. But to tie this back into what we said earlier on how times have changed, in some ways it's harder than ever start a company. I would say product market fit today is not enough. If you achieve product market fit, identify your ideal customer. Let's say you even have $1 million ARR. If you don't have defensibility and you haven't identified a unique distribution arbitrage, you're nothing more than a lifestyle business. You don't qualify for venture capital. You probably don't qualify for most angel investors. And what I mean by that is, I'd rather for a founder to have defensibility and distribution arbitrage and be 70% there to product market fit, because that way I can fund them $1 to $5 million and they can blow $5 million, instead of them finding product market fit but have no defensibility, and then 5 years later they end up blowing 50 or 100 million in venture capital, right? Because that's happened dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And that's ultimately the worst possible scenario. So let me define defensibility. Defensibility today, there's really only a few, network effects. You have some form of innovation that can be protected by IP. You have unique relationships. So that would be if you are in a business that right now is highly regulated, legal, healthcare, etc. So that's defensibility. Find something where you can build a moat around your business, and in 5 years, a bigger company can't eat your lunch. Distribution arbitrage. You're a startup, regardless of how much money you have and how much money you can raise. If you can't get customers at less than market cost of acquisition. So let's say you're in the fintech space, CAC is $350 per client. If you can't lower the cost of acquisition to $20 per client, you probably won't succeed long-term to get to a point that you can overcome certain competition that exists in the space. They may or may not choose to buy you, but that's a risk, right? So product market fit is kind of a given today, Most VCs and investors I know don't even say product market fit in their pitches. They just assume you guys know. There's so many resources out there today. So
You will
many
know
books.
if you have it.
And you'll know, right? So they go straight to defensibility. It's like, what if I wanted to build this company? And keep in mind, if one of these billionaire VCs says I want to build this company, that should be scary, and you better have a good answer. And then they're going to ask, okay, how much are you paying per customer? And then is that scalable or not? Those two things are more than ever important today.
Yeah, no, great point. And building on that there's a whole concept of benchmarking, right? Competitive benchmarking. I recommend that when you're in any space, by the way, you're only unique until the moment you share what you do with one person. Okay. So I don't know how many times I've heard a startup say, well, I'm the only person in the world doing this. And I go, well, no, actually I just saw 3 other people yesterday. And so, understand your market, understand your competition better than you know your own business. And by the way, you can learn from them. If someone's doing something well, shamelessly steal, right? Look, not a bad example, but yet an example. What's the difference between Lyft and Uber? Right? Not much, except that one started first, right? But even the app looks the same. And so, Lyft was able to build a multi-billion-dollar business because they basically studied Uber and they knew Uber better than Uber, right? And so just don't ever now, but guess what? The reason why Uber did well is that they captured the market, right? A larger share of the market, right? And so when you're getting venture capital, there's a couple of things that you need to understand. You need to kind of see where you are in the market, right? And how big that market is. And venture capital is risk capital. So these investors know that. Okay. Now I'm going to give it a little difference between venture capital and angel investors because their mindset is completely different, by the way. But understand that when you get that money and you have that team and everything else, the reason why you get these millions of dollars is because they want you to capture that market, right? And once you capture that market, then when competition comes, that's a moat in itself, right? Unless you really screw things up, right? And that's why Lyft hasn't really been able to, they're a huge competitor. They are their largest competitor, but the market was so big that there was even a place for Lyft, right? And so now getting back to venture versus angel investments, right? And why and accelerators are generally like venture capital, but you got to understand the mindset of an angel investor, someone who invests from their own bank account versus venture. They sometimes have a little shorter term mindsets, right? Because this is hard earned money that they've earned, right? And so there's an expectation of a return sometimes, and yet this is where you need to understand from that mindset who that individual investor is, what is it that they want? What do they want from you, right? Now, ultimately, if they were smart, they say, okay, I'm going to help you get some venture money, right? Because at least they're going to get some paper gains, they're not going to get some returns. But just understand that institutional money is there to take risk. And there's a whole thing called the power law of venture, right? Where that's why they allow you to do that. And that's why Silicon Valley is so unique. And by the way, other markets that have venture capital is not the same. Silicon Valley is the only market in the world where we give the founders the benefit of the doubt first. And literally go to, I don't know, LA a little less, New York definitely a lot less, and overseas way less than that. So understand that so understand the mindset of those investors that you're dealing with and their tolerance for risk, right, with you and going down that journey. And so when you, just as much as they're interviewing you, you need to interview them and make sure that this is someone that I can be with, because if you're raising institutional capital, they're going to be on your board. That's another thing you can't get rid of, right? You can't get rid of your investors because they're on the cap table for as long as that company exists. So choose your investors wisely. And don't be afraid to say no. Okay. Sometimes saying no is the best decision you've ever made.
And just to expand on that, venture capital is very different, is risk on capital, and there's only two kinds of companies that qualify for venture. The first kind is a deep tech, fundamentally. Think OpenAI. Takes years to build, millions in capital, whether that's paid through investor capital or equity from founders, working for free for many years on a technology. So the purpose of venture capital is they want to see a monopoly. They want to see a winner take all. The second kind of company is what's called a blitzscaling company. This is an investment in a team, in a company that can move faster than anyone else. There isn't a lot of inherent defensibility, but it's a winner take all market, and the market is sizable. Think Uber, think Lyft, right? If you can't put your company into one of those two buckets, it's going to be very difficult to raise venture capital. And you have to be able to make that argument. Where angel investors may not want to even see you go IPO. They may exit at Series A. And the majority that I know add clauses to have that flexibility. So that's a very important distinction. I will add, you have to know your competition, but don't necessarily let your competition steer what you're building. If your competition isn't a unicorn, if they are not a $100 billion company, they're doing something wrong. And that's where the opportunity is. Know your competition, but let the customer steer what you build. So don't get married with competition. My other pet peeve, I think I'm only at 2. That's pretty good for me.
I
Is founders obsess over competition. They look at all of the competition in the market and they're like doing a direct comparison. They have these features, but we have these. Then the next question is, okay, but what's preventing them from adding those features, right? So don't let the competition necessarily dictate what you're doing. Do something. The reason I built an exploding bike lock was because all of my friends were building apps at the time. Literally, there was no other reason. It was solving my own problem, but the last thing I wanted to do was build an app at that time. Because I don't know if you guys, how many of you were here in 2015, let's say, everyone and their grandmothers had an app doing virtually everything. And if you have friends that are doing similar things, investors probably have heard a dozen people doing the exact same thing. So it's really, really hard to differentiate.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But be aware of the competition, and you can learn from them. But as you said, don't mimic them. There's a reason why you started the company. So I agree with you on that piece.
And with the competition, it also helps with the product market validation. If you see someone else doing it, then they already did the job to say that it exists. Now the question is, how do I do it better and win those customers and truly disrupt in that way? To wrap up, we've learned a lot about how we can truly accelerate, not only from accelerators themselves, but also from angel investors, from VCs, and also just new offense techniques like having defensibility, product market fit being your baseline essentially. What's the last bit of advice you would share with our startup founders today as they're going about accelerating their journey and prepping for applying for startups themselves? Prepping for applying to accelerators themselves.
Go ahead.
So I help a lot of founders raise capital, and for my last and final pet peeve, I see far too many founders fail to raise, not because they don't have a great team or a great product, or because they aren't a great founder technically, or they aren't good at sales, etc. I see far too many fail because they don't understand the social contracts between investor and founder communication. And you're touching on this. It's a lot easier to follow some of these contracts when you're not in desperation. But the core of this idea is, at the end of the day, the earlier your stage, the more it is about relationships than it is absolute numbers. If you're raising a pre-seed or angel round, those investors are betting on you as a person more than your idea, more than your business, more than your skills, virtually more than everything. They're looking for certain characteristics where when you interact with them, they're visualizing, can I see myself can I see this person surrounded by 100 employees giving an inspirational talk on how they're going to become from a $1 billion company to a $10 billion company, for example? Are they going to be able to be charismatic enough to inspire these people, to find these people, to hire these people? Because how you treat that investor at that point in time is going to be their proxy for how they're going to assume you're treating other investors, your customers, your partners, and virtually everyone else. So be very wary of not building a relationship before pitching. Don't shotgun pitch an investor. Make sure to understand what the investor is looking for, connect on a deeper level, and make sure you communicate the intangibles of who you are as a person, because that is imperative in the early stages. By Series A, it'll probably be all AI making those decisions. But where we earn our paychecks is angel, pre-seed, and seed.
Yeah, good point. Let me kind of share with you why I kind of got in this industry, which I think is somewhat important, at least from my perspective. I started my career at Xerox, okay, a very large company. And when I, was working at, that decision, and by the way, I'm kind of old, so I'm about 150 years old, but entrepreneurship, when I graduated from college, was like, there was only one school that had it, and that was USC. And I went to UC Irvine. So, I was thinking, what the heck am I going to do now, right? So I knew I liked technology and anything around that. And so I kind of narrowed it down to two companies, IBM and Xerox. And I end up, this is how, stupid I was back then. Well, not stupid, but, just how simple my decision-making was. The reason I chose Xerox, I said, you know what? Xerox is a smaller company. It has 158,000 employees. IBM has 350. That's too big of a company for me to work in. And so when I left Xerox, right, and I remember this, and so, when I left, managers are saying, why are you leaving, Kayvan? And I said, you know what? I realized, and the company was going through some major changes at the time. I said, I just realized today that no matter how good I am, I'm employee 898071. I still remember my employee number, right? And I said, I don't feel I can make a difference here. But the one thing I knew that the startup ecosystem, and then, getting to, starting Plug and Play with Saeed and so forth, I said, you know what? The one thing that startups lack that I took for granted at Xerox was that commitment to training me to become a better employee, right? Xerox has one of the best training facilities in the world. And I said, if I could provide that sort of culture and training in the form of an accelerator program for startups, then I feel like, that's my mission, right? And that's why Peach Score does that. Peach Score, and the reason I'm bringing this up is, I think that if there's one single attribute besides being tenacious, besides being a great relationship builder, all these things you got to do, creating something from nothing, being creative, the one, I think, skill that I think you need to have, number one skill, is be a learner, right? Be committed to learning. And I don't care how many years of experience you have, the process of building something out of nothing to go into these markets, it's all about learning, right? So be a student of your own craft. And that's why accelerator programs are there, is to kind of refine that, right? I help start accelerator programs here in the Valley. And I'm telling you, every time I teach it or I start a program, I promise you, I think I'm learning more than the founders are. And I'm teaching the same stupid stuff, right? We add more content and so forth, but it's the same thing. And so understand that, it's really important, that humility to yourself, right? To say, yes, I have great experience. I've had success, but I don't know what I don't know. And the only way to do that is to engage with people, to network, to learn, and to engage. So that's really, really important. And that's what accelerators offer you, right? They offer you the opportunity to network. They offer you the opportunity to learn and to raise capital and to be part of a community. That's why everything I've done has been community-based. Plug and Play probably one of the world's largest communities, Founders Institute, right? 500 startups. These are all communities where they're there to support each other, and so I highly recommend that you try and get into one of these programs. Peace Corps has its own value. That engine, that scoring engine that it provides, I haven't seen anything like that in the world. And it's and it's not like I don't have enough things to do, but and that's why I decided to join the board of the company, become the executive chairman of the company, because I said, what, this is the future of innovation and entrepreneurship. And they've figured out how to apply AI to help the founders. Because when you think about it, if you just think at it at the surface, how could you get data on something that doesn't exist, right? But they've cracked that nut. Peace Corps has cracked that nut. And so if you just put enough effort into your thought process, you'll realize that the data is there. And so that's what's really important here, is that whole thing about learning and leveraging data and leveraging the network, leveraging those relationships, and understand that it's a journey. Understand that you're salmon swimming upstream, okay? Not everyone's going to make it, but that's okay. And when they say failure is okay, I disagree with that. Failure is never okay. It hurts. It stings. So I don't care what people say, but what's important about failure is what you've learned from it. And that's why they say failure is okay. Not because, I've never seen a 4-time failure entrepreneur say, hey, I failed 4 times. Give me $1 million. I'm going, wait. Why did you fail 4 times? Right? That is not, a badge of honor. It's a badge of honor only if you learn from it. And that story you can tell.
Yeah, just to end on, it's going to be a journey. And the most important thing is commit to that journey. It's going to take many years. The transferability from any other career, let's say the corporate world, is sub 5%. And I think that's what a lot of founders don't understand. So their expectations come in very high. If you really want this, just commit to this being a decade-long journey, and you'll figure it out over time. The 2 most expensive things for VCs, angel investors, etc. The first one is ego. If I can put ego on a balance sheet, that would be the biggest contributor of expenses in any startup. It's just certain executives, founders at a company had too much ego to take the right advice from whether it's an accelerator or advisor, etc. And then, the second thing I think is really the inability to learn. So it is a learning journey, and I wish all of you the best of luck on this journey.
Yeah.
With that being said, thank you to Kayvan and Daniel.
Thank you.
Now we have the gas to truly accelerate. Thank you again.